Okay, and now let me get
Every time.
let me unplug so we get the sound.
At least we're just switching on microphones and not, trying to haul a ship out of the ocean or a boat out of the sea, rather. Ship would be too big, I think.
Very odd comparison, but okay. Were you watching Fitzcarraldo recently by Werner Herzog or something?
That's a really bad analogy. Oh, yeah, but
okay.
someone's wife jumping out of a plane. I was listening to that this morning. Okay, welcome to the Tokyo Jazz Joints podcast. This is episode 109, which means that it is number 2 in our Tokyo Jazz Joints Top of the Pops Top 10 countdown. We're at the business end of the top 10, and I'm slightly excited and a little bit trepidatious about what's to come in the next 2 episodes, but I've been having a think this morning, and I think possibly I know where we're headed, but you've thrown me with a few ones so far, so who knows. How are you doing this fine Sunday morning?
Feeling great, excited to get to, as you say, I wouldn't have phrased it that way, the business end, but I was thinking more ascend to the mountaintop of our top 10 rankings. I tend to view it with a little bit more
down, though, so
a little bit more grandeur,
down to the top of a mountain.
A little bit more grandeur. Feeling good. Had a great weekend. Had some beautiful spring weather here, so I was out and around. Had a few nice cold beverages in the evening, and it's been a good week for a change. I've gotten over the horror of the previous week's dental adventures, which I'll spare our listeners. I'm sure everyone has their own dentist stories. So this was a bad one, but it's all recovered now, and I'm ready to crack into this very cold tall can of Sapporo Classic. And then get into our number 2. I believe, Philip, that I about lead off for this one. Got it in the notes.
Yeah, I imagine you've been glued to the golf all weekend as well, I guess, have you? The US Masters.
Well, first of all, golf's not a sport. So number 2, no, I have not. No. I watch a proper sport called baseball, not golf.
If it's not a sport, that's just the same sport, but you hold the bat at a different angle.
If you can drink while you're playing the game, it is not athletic and it's not sports. Okay, and that's what a lot of people do.
I don't think people drink while they're playing golf. I mean, maybe water, but
that's what businessmen do all the time. They hit the cocktails and hit the links, right? Drink all day.
Yeah, but I'm not watching businessmen. I'm not watching businessmen play golf. I'm watching seasoned professionals.
Turn that off. Put the darts on. You're in the UK, or the snooker. Now, that's a proper game that you've got.
Well, snooker starts next week, so I will literally be doing that.
Just don't watch on a black and white TV. Yes, we are ready for number 2. I'm interested. Yeah, you said in the intro that you're a bit trepidatious because maybe you may have an idea where I'm going, or we may be crossing the streams a bit again. I don't know. I don't know what you meant by that. But let's see.
Again. Let's see. Put that image back in my head.
Come on, big Ghostbusters fan. Okay, number 2. Wow, where do we start with this? Okay, let's start when I was, as you would put it, a wee lad growing up in Brooklyn back in the late 70s and early 80s. It's funny.
Come on, we're going back that far?
Oh, yeah, we got to go. We got to back far. Stick with me.
Oh, this is going to be a really long episode if you're starting in the 70s.
Well, they're going to be long. These ones will be long. We got more to say. No. I'll keep it brief. We grew up in such different places, even though we're pretty much the same age, such different environments, such different households. And a big difference was that I grew up in a pretty much a completely a religious home. My parents were from 2 different religions, and neither of them really gave a crap about it. In fact, I would say my father's completely he's militant atheist. And so, I didn't grow up with any of the kinds of things that a lot of my friends did in Brooklyn, like whether they were Irish or Italian Catholics in Brooklyn, or my friend from Hong Kong, and they used to follow a lot of the Chinese traditions, or, Orthodox Jews next door, whatever. We didn't have any of that stuff. And I grew up never even once thinking about religion or religious things or faith or however people define it to themselves. But what I eventually discovered, and I think that this would apply to you too in some ways, and to a lot of people who listen to this podcast, is I discovered it through music. Music, in a sense, became like my religion. You know, it became the thing that I would look to for the things that other people find in their religious faiths, you know? So, you know, when we started the project and we started going around the country and you know, discovering these jazz kisses, and Philip, you've talked a lot about the shrine-like aspect of so many of these places, right? You know, the way they honor the music, sometimes even physically, the way the speakers are. It's almost like a little temple, you know? I think you have a great picture in Root Down in Kanda where he's got the Japanese white suna ropes that you see in a Shinto shrine, literally next to the speakers, you know? So there is that religious element to it. And no place has, to me, got to that point. I've actually called it, it's the temple of jazz in Japan, and it's Coltrane in our beloved Kyushu. Now...
Hang on. Sorry, 1 second. I've just got a call coming in.
Uh-oh.
Hang on.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, it turns out that it's also my number 2.
Fantastic.
I knew it.
Fantastic.
I knew it would be the same. I thought I had it wrong, and then when you started with that religion, I thought, hang on, here we go. Yeah. So I'm going to let you carry on, but yeah, also my number 2. I'm very, very pleased to hear that. That is amazing.
And
there's no way he won't have Coltrane in here.
Well, you know, it's funny because I think when we first started talking about this little top 10 series, in my head, Coltrane was like an easy number 1. It was like automatically number 1. It's not, for reasons we'll get to on next week's episode, but yeah, I mean, I think that. So, you know, look, we've been there twice, very luckily together. Now, it's not always we get to places together, especially in the countryside, right? You know, on a second visit. Yeah. And so I think because our first visit was so mental, which we've covered at length on that long Kyushu day where we ended up there at 10:30 p.m. So you can go back and listen to that episode. We should probably link that too for people who want to hear about our first trip to Coltrane. But our second trip was also so memorable because we were able to give them a copy of the book and show them that, you know, how much we valued the place. But I mean, Coltrane is, it truly is. I mean, Harasan, the master, he has created a place, and we've talked so much about how a lot of the joints, you know, even on this series, that they're named after the owner's favorite musician. Sometimes they became friends. They have this sort of reverent feel to them. But Coltrane takes it to a different level. It's a freestanding building. It's very unusual in a place like Tokyo. It's sort of like not surrounded by anything. It's painted a very deep green, forest green, and it's got a huge mural of Coltrane's face on it. You can see it from the train when the train pulls into Tosu Station coming from Fukuoka. As you walk in, you see, well, maybe this isn't quite so reverential, but there's a Coltrane doormat, which you actually step on, which I hesitated to do so.
Awkward.
And then when you come in, you see not only just the usual posters or, you know, framed photos of the great man, but you see quotes of his as well. So you feel like you're entering this large room that is completely devoted to the memory of who, for me, and I think for you too, is a musician that brought jazz to me in a new way. It wasn't just, you know, foot tapping, you know, shake your ass around a little bit or cry to a ballad. Like Coltrane's music, and that's why I brought up the fact of me growing up non-religious. When I got into Coltrane's later music, in particular on Impulse, to me, it was sacred music. It was the way some people might go to church to listen to Bach's St. Matthew's Passion or a gospel church or whatever, you know? That was, for me, my way to like communicate to the universe in the way that a lot of religious people do. And Coltrane to me is the equal of the African Orthodox Church of St. Coltrane in San Francisco, which I also very luckily got to go. They play Love Supreme the first Sunday of every month. They perform it in a band and vocals, you know. To me, this is the Japanese version of that. So they're not actually doing a live performance or explicitly saying this is a church or a temple, but that's what it feels like when you go in, even down to all of the incredible dishware. Remember, every coffee mug, every ashtray, every saucer has Coltrane's face on it, you know? One of the great regrets is that we weren't able to get some of those as souvenirs, you know? And then
you did ask, didn't you?
I did ask. I asked them to sell it to me, and they said they wouldn't. Yeah, she was like, no, we can't because the guy who made it, you know, he retired, and I don't know if I can get any more made. And I was thinking, you've got dozens of them, please. I'll give you 10,000 yen for a tiny espresso mug, But they wouldn't do it. But I did get my beautiful maroon sweatshirt, which was the 30th anniversary sweatshirt that he was selling. I remember sitting there, we were looking at, he was showing us his notebook where every Coltrane album had a photograph and notation of the album details that he put together in this big loose leaf notebook. And it was like a priest taking out like a scroll, like a holy scroll to show you when you come to share in your worship of Coltrane. But Philip, the most amazing thing is all of this highfalutin talk that I'm talking about, right? The third time that I went there, and I don't know if I said this on the episode, so I came back by myself and I was just like, okay, you know what? I don't even have any other plans. I can relax. I can come and spend a couple hours here. And I walked in and I was feeling all of these emotions, these deep emotions. Pray at the temple of Coltrane Jazz Kisa. And I walk in and Hara-san is there with clearly an old friend of his. And they've got the baseball game on, but it's muted. And they're playing some sort of hard bop record. I don't know, maybe Lou Donaldson, Hank Mobley or something. And they're sitting there and they're chain smoking and drinking coffee. And they're arguing about baseball in the way only that old friends could do. You know what I mean? Like, I think his friend said to Hara-san, like,
yeah,
oh, you've always had a thing about curveballs. I don't know why, and I all of a sudden it just struck me as like, I came in with all these really deep, stupidly pretentious or profound feelings or whatever, but these guys, this is also just, this is their life. This is their daily life. This is where they drink their coffee, read their newspaper, smoke their cigs, and talk baseball. It's a daily living experience. And I just burst out into a big smile because I realized that, you know what, Coltrane is both. It is this beautiful temple to jazz and to one of our heroes, but it's also a place where these guys have been meeting for 40 years to argue the same baseball arguments, drink their coffee and hang out. And I just thought, if this is heaven, this would be, I hope I make it to there because it maybe 3.5, 4 hours out of my entire life were spent in Coltrane. And I value them as much as absolutely anything I've ever done. So, and there is a reason that it came in at 2. We'll get to that next week. Otherwise, you would think with what I'm saying, it would be 1. But yeah, I think it's truly a remarkable experience. And I'm so glad that we were able to share that,
Yeah. I mean, you've covered a lot there. I think for me, technically I've been 3 times actually, because I don't know if you remember, and again, if you want to go back, I think it's 6 Days in June, I think is the name of, there's sort of a little mini series within the podcast episodes where we cover this kind of crazy day. But actually we had been the day before. So the first day we went was 25th of June, 2018. That was the year after I'd left Japan. So I'd come back and we went. And we didn't get in, and I think you called Hara-san and he said, look, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. And so we planned to come back the next day, and as we've talked about, at length in that episode, we kind of, screeched into the car park at like 10:40 p.m. after a very long day, and they'd kept it open. And so it was the 26th of June, 2018 was actually the first time. And probably one of the most used photographs in press and all that kind of stuff, it seems to be, and it's one that people seem to gravitate towards, was a photograph I took on that evening of Hara-san putting on a Coltrane record in his little kind of glass fronted record room DJ or turntable booth, which is part of Coltrane. Just when Coltrane, when you come in the front door, it's just right in front of you. So he kind of walks along to the end of the bar, you take a step up, and then you go into this kind of beautiful room. And as you said, it's all, like a library documentation of these records and just talking even about the scrolls. I mean, as you remember probably from the first time we went, he gave us this ring binder, and within that were these kind of little plastic sleeves with business cards and these meticulously written set lists for every album, and then a tiny little color photocopy of the record sleeve, again, like just documented absolutely meticulously in this pristine folder. And that, I mean, that in itself was enough, in the sense that we just were kind of blown away. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of people listening have seen the photograph of the building. Like you said, it's kind of like it's not even pistachio. It's this really kind of lurid green color. But what's also striking about it, I think, is just looking back at the photos. It's like there's so many, you could not miss it, because it's not just there's a gable wall on one side which has Jazz Spot Coltrane, a huge portrait of Coltrane from the Blue Train album. But then when you come around the other side, on the other wall is another photograph, which is one of my favorites actually. It just says in this beautiful font, "Coffee, Modern Jazz, Whiskey and Live," and it has this kind of peach strip along the wall, and then there's a few little plant pots set down. But then there's also like the classic Jazz Kisa sign with the backlit sign that we're so used to seeing. There's another one which is kind of a standing sign on the other side that also has Coltrane's face. So like you're left in no doubt before you even get in, like what is the purpose of this place, like who is this dedicated to? And like you say, it's in any place I think it would be unusual, but particularly surrounded by these 1-story, 2-story at most kind of suburban residences, and then you just have this enormous kind of wooden building. I mean, it looks, to all the world, from me, it from the side in particular, it almost looks like, the sort of, that kind of like American kind of, the sort of building you'd see on like a farm or a ranch, it's just got this huge...
Yes,
it's that sort of building, right? It
doesn't look like a Japanese type of building that you see, whether urban or suburban. No, absolutely not.
It's just a fascinating place, and so obviously we had that incredible evening, and like it had been such a crazy day, and I think in the end we only had sort of 20 to 30 minutes before we left.
Yes, and they were. I mean, they were so kind to they were really kind. Like you mentioned, like he showed us the book, they showed us around, but it was pretty clear. It was like we're kind of old. It's late. Like, okay, time to go. Like, we're not, you have to come back another time if you want to linger. You know what I mean? So, but I mean, we made it, but yeah, it was, I think I had it down as like less than 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was so quick. And I mean, I think again, like, just the nature of not having the money and time to just endlessly wander the Japanese countryside, going to jazz places, there are those constraints that we have, like financially and in terms of time and everything else. So you think, well, look, I've been here, and it was this amazing experience. And again, you're able to preserve that in, photographically. And for me also, I got the opportunity to, and I remember asking her to join in the photograph, and I took this photograph of them, which at the moment now hangs actually on the wall of Rhinoceros in Berlin. But this is a portrait of the two of them, of the two Haras, Hara-san, the owner, and then his wife, also Hara-san. And, behind them is the bottles of whiskey. And then you can see those cups and saucers that you're talking about with Coltrane's face. And like, I think for me, in my mind, that was Coltrane. But then we went back in... It was 9th of February 2024, and of course, in this interim period, like we'd had the pandemic. I think this was the second time I'd come back after COVID. So I got back in 2023, and then this next trip in 2024, we made it down to Tosu again. And what struck me, which is something I've mentioned before about so many of these owners, they had aged so quickly in a short period of time. Whether that's just that time of life, whether also the COVID pandemic also, hit people hard. The owners, Hara-san, like his wife, even, in the photograph that I took in 2018, she had, her hair was quite short. It was dyed brown. And then, she'd let it be grey, like naturally grey in this 2024. So there's just this real sense of like aging. And he in particular looked so much older.
Yeah, it was kind of, I remember we were talking about that. It was pretty shocking. And it's funny because I'm looking at, someone who's been very helpful to this whole project, Tashiro-san, who wrote the Kyushu Jazz Guide that our good friend Ishii-san gave us copies of when we met at Brownie. Tashiro-san self-published those three volumes of the Kyushu Jazz Guide. So on his blog, he's got a recent picture So it's this, I guess, even a year and a half after we visited, right before they were closing, he went to see them, and both of them are smiling. But the difference between that and looking at the pictures you were just describing, the pictures you took, is extremely shocking, because it doesn't look like 5 years; it looks more like 10 to 15 years, really. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable, and it's something, you know, we've experienced in Bird 56 was another one that really struck me as well. But look, you know, we got back again. It was sort of 6 o'clock. It was a bit earlier this time. I think they were having some live music later that evening. But for me, I mean, this was almost as much of a kind of a. I mean, you're talking about this sort of spiritual experience. I think for me, this was probably one of the pinnacles of like the Tokyo Jazz Joints project to date, I think. And I wrote a little piece about this that I kind of did, like a semi-performance type thing that I did at a couple of conferences in a couple of places, related to the book, like different events, because, I mean, we came in just as normal, as regular customers, and I remember he was sitting at the bar and he sort of did, you know, kind of irashimasen, and he got up. But the first thing, of course, that we noticed was that he had a stick. So he was walking with like a stick. And then we got, you know, chatting to them. And I just remember, like, you know, having a copy of the book and kind of the nervousness. We sat down, we had a drink, and then I kind of remember approaching him. He was sitting back down at the end of the counter and saying, "Oh, you know, I don't know if you remember, we were here, and in the interim, this book has been published, and, you know, I just wanted you to see it." And he sat and kind of leafed through it, and I just remember that point when he got to the photograph of himself. And it was just, for me, like, you know, thinking back, like in 14, like having this idea and like coming to you, and then, you know, we sort of started it, and it kind of gathered momentum, and like we became, you know, really good friends through this whole project. And then to be back there basically 10 years later from the initial, having the initial idea with this book, and him sitting there just looking at this picture of him, a younger version of himself, you know. And I will always remember what he said, because I'd put it in this like thing that I wrote, which was basically like, I remember he looked at it and he kind of flicked through. He's obviously, I think there's 5 photos of Coltrane in the book, and then he closed it, and he just looked round, and he had this huge smile, and he just said, "Kore de ashi mata tsuyoku natta." And it was like, which means, obviously, sorry, if you don't speak Japanese, basically means, you know, he was referencing, because it turns out the stick had been, he had had a fall, and he'd fractured or broken a bone in his leg. So this is why he was using the stick. And basically, by looking at the book, he said, you know, my legs got stronger just seeing this book. And I just thought, like, for me, it was just this full circle moment where we're back in this place. You know, he's looking at this younger version of himself, and it, you know, then we got talking, and a lot of this stuff came out about, you know, he'd sort of come to the end of what he wanted to do, and he was going to close it, and, you know, he was going to try and preserve it and make sure that everything was given to one place and it wasn't all broken up into pieces. And so it's just like a very emotional evening. I think it's probably one of the most emotional experiences for me, you know. And I'll send you the photo now. I think you may have it too, but and there's just a beautiful photo. Not a posed portrait, perhaps in the same way, but just of him and her, and him holding the book and the spread of picture of him. And I just thought, you know, for me,
that's great. That's great.
One of the most incredible. I remember,
Philip. I remember that very, very vividly, because we talked about it on the way out when we were heading back into town, into Fukuoka. And you were describing exactly what you've just shared, that's that sort of feeling. And I remember, because, you know, remember when the book got here, you still hadn't been back. And then I started taking it. Remember, I started taking copies around Tokyo, right? So like I brought a book to Goto-san at Eagle, and, you know, Miyazaki-san at Samurai, and Moscow, you know, etc. And so I had that sort of feeling already, where it was like I got to give it to these owners to be honest, maybe had forgotten, because it had been several years since we had come around taking pictures, I mean, some of them knew me and stuff, but still they were really like, oh, wait, you've got this? What's that? And oh, I'm in it, And so I remember I'd gotten all those reactions, but I think that might have been the first one that you got coming back. And then to have it be combined with it being culture and with it being the feeling of Hadasan and what he said. I mean, yeah, you were quite overwhelmed. I remember. I mean, it was such an amazing feeling, and they were like legit happy, because I think at first, of course, they didn't remember us, but once we explained it, they were like, oh yeah, and you could tell they weren't just being the kind of polite Japanese, right? Like, they did actually remember when we had been several years back doing the pictures, and so it was an absolute special treat, and yeah, I kind of agree. I think the feelings that we got from them and the appreciation, and just like the ability to share the sort of like love that we had for them and for the place is just one of those memories that will last forever. I mean, it's and it's funny because I'm looking right now, like I said, like I've got Tashio-san's blog open, and he's got a bunch of pictures from when he went by in January, so a good 3 months ago. As our listeners, as everybody knows, Culture is now closed. I'm looking at the blog. I don't see any clear updates, though, about the plan they had to sort of move a lot of the records and the books and the the memorabilia to a centralized community space. That was the original plan. I don't see the update here about that. He does say that he'll be back soon with another update, and Tashio-san is one of those people who's basically the documenter of Kyushu jazz, right, with his books, with his blogs. So I'll keep monitoring it to see, because I am really interested. But look, I mean, Hada-san, he's going to be 85 soon. Like you mentioned, Philip, do you remember when he went back to the record booth and she was looking through the book, and then she was talking to us?
Yeah, I just sent you that picture actually, because that was something, I have this morbid fear of, like, I always had this fear of, like, sort of, dragging people through things and be, oh yeah, it's lovely. And, even last night we had people around for dinner, like family around for dinner, and Judy was like, oh, have you seen Tokyo Jazz Joint's book? And I'm like, oh, it's fine. Like, people don't, you don't need to, like, force people to, like, look at it or whatever, and it's probably does people disservice, because many people are genuinely interested, even if they're not into jazz or into jazz keys or photography or whatever it might be. But I think, similar to when you took it to the guy in Samurai, the owner in Samurai, and he looked through it, again, sort of page by page. A very
the
point. I think you got quite drunk waiting for him to finish, right?
Yes,
snacking these beers. But I mean, after he had looked at the book in Coltrane, he passed it on to her, and she just sat down behind the bar. And just, really, again, very consciously just looked through the whole book page by page. And it just makes you feel, that it was a genuine kind of interest and fascination in it. And
but do you remember what she told us, though? She because he, as you mentioned, he had this cane.
Oh yes.
He was limping off to the record room, and then she told us. We said, oh, is he okay? He said he had a fall, and she said, well, to be honest, like I don't let him open the shop alone anymore, because if I'm not here, and if there's no customer here, and he could fall again, and he could really, it could be, who knows, it could be an hour, he could be, and so when she was saying that, and we were just like, oh geez, man, I mean, she's there a lot anyways, but obviously now she's, and as is typical, as we've talked about a lot on this podcast, a couple of that generation in Japan, she's, I would estimate, minimum 5 years younger than him. Maybe more, we don't know. And also, I mean, Japanese women, they're the longest lived people in the world, right? She's still pretty healthy, looks healthy, moves around well. And it's clear that, like, if the place was going to stay open, she would really have to take most control of it or get someone else in. He could do the records. He could sit there at the counter, but he couldn't be running around the kitchen and washing stuff and doing all that. So I again, that's sort of, it was that sort of thing where like, and well, look, I mean, this was 2024 that you and I went, and he had mentioned already the plan, and it still was a year and a half after that until they finally closed. Almost 2 years, really. So they got in almost another 2 years since that conversation. Yeah. But I can only imagine that he was moving even a bit slower, and certainly not taking those steps up to the second floor where a lot of the storage was. The drinks and whatnot are kept. Like there's no way he'd be doing that. So I was surprised they kept it open as long as they did. But I'll definitely have to keep an eye out about the news about because I mean, again, looking at the pictures, Coltrane, for people who have not been there, as befitting what we described of the structure, and also it's outside of Tokyo. It's not even in Fukuoka City. It's a suburban city of outside Fukuoka. It's a big space, and they had a lot of things in there. They had huge speaker systems, they had a drum kit, all of these different posters and framed pictures of Coltrane and other jazz musicians, all of the silverware, and his records. I mean, my God, I mean, he had I think he had 6,000 records just in there, and I'm sure he had more at home as well. So trying to, I mean, I just, fingers crossed that this stuff has been preserved as best as possible, because the thought of it being just sold off to a bunch of random people, or God forbid, even just, thrown away,
well, I think
makes me want to cry,
I mean, I think we don't know, but I think we did mention this in a previous episode, but I think my understanding, at least of what he was saying, was that there was some sort of museum, or they were opening some sort of community, museum type building within, and I think it was an old Aeon mall that had closed down, like an old sort of supermarket mall that had closed down. So,
and that the city was going to be running
more than other places. Yeah, I mean, more than other places, I think it was, it was going to be preserved. And
we also know in Japan, this stuff takes forever to happen.
Not quick.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, it could be 6 months to a year, maybe, until we get, I mean, we know that from Chigusa, we know that from Minton House, things move very slowly here with that kind of thing. So, but it's definitely one to keep an eye on.
I mean, I don't know if, this was his intention, but obviously when we went that second time, the record that he put on before we left was actually Transition, which, seems now particularly, and in light of that conversation and everything we've just
did we not request that?
Seemed quite fitting.
Are you sure?
I think.
Are you sure we didn't request that? Because that's one of my five favorite Coltrane records.
I don't think so. No.
Do you think he just put that on?
He put it on. I'm pretty sure he put it on, but I photographed it for that reason, I think. And I think, in light of what we've talked about, very fitting, and perhaps
and in using, again, in keeping on the sort of spiritual angle, the Japanese have a wonderful expression called enga aru, which is basically like, it was kind of faded, I guess you would say. It's hard to translate that, but it's sort of like, it of course he put on a Coltrane record for us, and to put that on, which is, obviously called Transition, and then also just happening to be one of my all-time favorites, and yours too. It's just sort of like, my God,
yeah.
Could this have been any more perfect? So, wow, Philip, that's great. I'm so happy that we aligned there. I knew you were going to have Coltrane somewhere on the list, but I wasn't sure. Once we got down past number 4, I was thinking, maybe he's not, So that's great, and it's perfect that we aligned in it too. That's awesome.
So that was number 2, which means there's only one left, and that is also quite literally number 1. So we will
very
be
good
back
math there,
next week,
as always.
Yep, with episode 110, also known as number 1 in the Tokyo Jazz Joint's top 10 countdown, and I cannot wait to see what you have chosen. My mind is racing at the possibilities.
Are you waiting with bated breath?
Yes. I mean, not today. Literally, because obviously that wouldn't make for great podcasting. But
people can imagine,
But anyway, number 2 done. We're nearly at the end of the countdown, and I will talk to you next week, my friend. In the meantime, have a good week, and talk soon.
You too. Looking forward to it, buddy. Talk to you soon.